far to the east, where citizens of the known realms have not dared step foot in a millennium, lies a region known as the Forbidden Lands. In light of a recent expedition spearheaded by the Royal Academy and the Monster Hunters Guild, information about this mysterious place has gradually come to light. In this piece, the Guild aims to collect all of the knowledge gained in the wake of the White Wraith investigation in an orderly and sanctioned manner. The first glimpses researchers of the modern Hunters Guild ever stole of the Forbidden Lands were those of an endless desert. Past the east-west buffer zone, a sea of trees gives way suddenly to a near infinite blanket of dunes. For a time, it almost seemed that this was all this forbidden region had to offer. A great desert, an ocean of dust and death. But in time, this wasteland was discovered to be a living ecosystem, one that sustains 36 distinct species of monsters and endemic creatures, both large and small. It is even home to a population of native humans, who live off of the land and coexist with it harmoniously. Upon inspection and communication with those natives, the Guild officially classified this area as a hunting ground and gave it the name Windward Plains. This arid region can broadly be separated into 4 zones. In the southwest, a vast sandy desert stretches as far as the eye can see, with massive dunes snaking their way across the horizon. Only sparse oases offer some respite from the blazing heat. It was through this very desert that the Guild first arrived in these lands. To the northwest lies a network of caves and cliffs, formed by fulgurite, a type of stone that emerges when sand is heated rapidly. The Guild's research has confirmed that this region experiences regular thunderstorms, and lightning strikes have been observed creating small pillars of fulgurite upon impact with the desert. It's thus been proposed that these tunnels and caves are the result of eons of lightning activity shaping the land itself over time. exacerbated by natural erosion. However it may have been formed, the fulgurite network here provides shade and protection for many different monster species that may, for one reason or another, prefer to not be out in the open. A unique property of fulgurite is that it can store a limited charge of electricity for some time, and the possible technological applications of this property are subject to guild research. In the northeast, the Windward Plains transition into a small grassland area, with some trees providing shade to any that seek out the water streams that flow through here. This zone is also where the Windward Plains connect to another hunting ground, the Scarlet Forest, which is where the stream originates from. As a result of this proximity and the presence of water, this is the liveliest area of the plains, with anything from insects to leviathans spending their time near the river and in the grass. At the furthest southeast tip stands the Windward Plains' signature landmark, the Wind's Gasp, an enormous crescent-shaped rock formation. It is said that thunder dances around it during storms, a claim evidenced by the copious amounts of fulgurite forming around it. The soil right beneath the monument is so saturated with the remains of thunderstorms that it hums with a silent but potent charge. Most monsters seem to avoid this area. The Wind's Gasp is, however, not the only peculiar geologic formation in the plains. All around the region, thin monoliths jut out from the soil, tens of meters tall, each inscribed with bizarre runes. Understanding these inscriptions and analyzing the makeup of these rod-like structures continues to be one of the guild's major tasks in the region. Like much of the Eastlands, the Windward Plains are mostly wilderness that seamlessly connects to small local settlements. The two main centers of human activity in the area are the Hunters Guild base camp in the central north and the village of Kunafa in the center. The latter, sometimes also called the Windsong Village, is home to a small but resilient population of native humans. Kunafans are pacifists that live in harmony with the land, maintaining a population of domesticated herbivores that provide them with milk, used in their now famous cheese-making. Kunafa Village is protected by its hidden location and the use of special decorations called gem chimes. Thin ropes adorned with shards of fulgurite hung around the perimeter of the settlement and on various buildings. As they sway, these chimes produce a high-pitched sound that repels all monsters in this region, as it closely imitates the calls of the Windward Plains' apex predator. It is an ingenious solution, and a demonstration of the Kunafans' deep dedication to coexisting with their surroundings. They feast and dance and tell stories of Somult, the great bird deity that spreads its majestic wings all across their folklore. Another unique aspect of the Kunathan people is their domestication of a large monster, a bird wyvern species called Sacred. These creatures are believed to have at one point roamed across the entirety of the Eastlands, but now their populations are entirely domesticated by Kunatha. They are generally green in coloration, but can change appearance based on the food that they are given to eat. Sturdy and agile, Sacred make excellent mounts, able to easily carry a person across any terrain. Their forelegs have small extendable wings, which can be used to glide through the air for some limited time, further expanding the utility and mobility of the Sacred and making them an extremely valuable part of life in Kunatha. The flora of the Windward Plains is defined by various succulents and other desert plants. At various times of the year, sandpeppers grow in the northern grasslands, which are a valuable source of food for the natives of Kunatha. Windward succulents are also highly desirable items, and bigger ones are sought after eagerly. But the most legendary plant of the Windward Plains is undoubtedly the night flower. Most of the time, they simply resemble featureless stems jutting out in various spots. But only under the light of the full moon do these plants show their true colors. In those rare instances, the night flower blooms, extending its beautiful blossoms and celebrating a brief moment of solitary majesty. It is unknown why only the light of the full moon specifically triggers this change, but the pollen expelled during this period is an extremely valuable commodity. When it was first surveyed by the Guild, the Windward Plains region was noted to be quite unlike most deserts. The sun shone meagerly through an overcast sky, and the grey air was thick with humming masses of corpse flies. The natives of the land later informed the Guild that this was a temporary state, a season experienced by the Forbidden Lands called the Fallow. Described by observers as a time of death and decay, its presence in the Windward Plains is marked by a simultaneous wilting of much of the plant life and a resulting reduction in active fauna. The air grows dry and stale, and while the cloudy skies diminish the heat of the sun somewhat, they also bathe the region in a sickly brown tint. But even in a state so dreary, the Eastlands still teem with creatures of all kinds. As a result of the diminished flora, resources in the Windward Plains become scarce during the fallow. Consequently, most large herbivores either die off or retreat, only rarely appearing to munch on the sparse vegetation. As a result, carnivorous monsters and scavengers reign supreme, preying on the exhausted herbivores and feasting on the remains of those the fallow claims. The premier herbivore species of the Windward Plains is the Keratonoth, a beaked species that is known to graze on the short grass in the north of the region. Keratonoth display significant sexual dimorphism. Females are small and slender, with long, scaly gowns that protrude from their backsides. Males, meanwhile, sport proper scale armor, crowned with impressive dorsal spikes, the largest of which can grow taller than the creature is long. Keratonoth live in herds, where numerous females live under the protection of just a handful of males. They tend to nest in the fulgurite caves, where larger predators struggle to ambush them. This, however, comes at the cost of sustenance being unavailable, as neither grass nor water are present among the fulgurite. As a result, Keratinoth herds must regularly venture into the grasslands to graze and drink. This is especially dangerous during the fallow, where they are the primary target of nearly every predator in the region. The fallow naturally also affects carnivorous monsters, which are driven into states of increased aggression by the decrease in consistent food sources. Any herbivore attempting to feed on what little vegetation is left must contend with many different threats. All across the plains travel packs of Talioth, vicious birdwyvern that become especially active during this time. Their light, slender bodies stand in stark contrast with their large, asymmetrical beaks. Their physiology is perfectly adapted to their hunting strategy. Pack hunters by nature, Talioth attempt to surround potential prey, weaving around it with significant agility. Once an opening presents itself, one of them leaps at the target, hurling its light body through the air with its massive, heavy beak wide open. On contact, the beak slams shut, and its odd curve shape ensures a secure and brutal grip. One by one, the pack latches onto their prey, and, by wiggling their bodies and shaking their beaks, the Talioth rip their target to shreds while they are still alive, tearing through skin and flesh with reckless abandon. A horrific death, and one that even large monsters dread during the fallow, when Talioth are at their most aggressive. Death comes quickly in the fallow, and sometimes in unexpected ways. At night, one might spot flickering lights dance around the fulgurite and grasslands and be tempted to investigate. This would be a fatal mistake, as those lights are the signature flashes of dark hornets, a species of nocturnal insect endemic to the Eastlands. The light is produced by luminous organs in their heads, which allow them to patrol the nights. Should they spot anything or anyone in that cone of light, dark hornets attack immediately. They are some of the most aggressive insects ever discovered, and will even fight large monsters when aggravated. An angry swarm of dark hornets is not to be trifled with. Each one wields a stinger capable of administering a deadly poison, which can easily bring down most creatures. One misstep in the fallow night, and an unassuming wanderer will find themselves stung and assaulted, soon to be overcome by convulsions and pain, silent screams snuffed out in darkness, unaware of what even befell them. The fallow is a season marked by stories like this. Every corner, a remnant of someone's errant struggle to persevere. But not all see these marks as tragic. Some find them downright delicious. A period of death is also a feast for scavenger species, which roam the plains in search of carrion they can snack on. One such species is the bonos, a type of wingdrake similar to those found in the New World. These dark red drakes are a common sight during the fallow, as they circle around in the air, ready to swoop down and devour any creature that perishes under their watch. They are not capable of hunting themselves, but have instead devised a powerful method of convincing predators to relinquish their spoils. On their thorax, Bonos grow specialized feathers that can be vibrated to produce a variety of loud sounds. By combining this ability with their own vocalizations, Bonos can create a loud and painful screech that can scare off many monsters far above their weight class. Bonos thus use this screech to secure carrion reliably. Just as one must beware the Fallow's wrath from above, so too does it hold danger from below. The dunes of the Windward Desert are home to an exceptional predator entirely unique to this region. Under the shifting sands lives a species of leviathan called Balahara, identifiable by its characteristic triple jaw and coiling drill-like carapace. Their bodies are specialized to drill through the sand with ease, allowing them to appear and disappear into the dunes at will. Their 3 jaws are lined with small blue eyes, which themselves can produce slight bioluminescence. With this impressive maul, Balahara can clamp down on prey and slowly disassemble it using its flexible teeth. In order to get its jaws around a tasty victim, Balahara employ a sneaky trick. By drilling through an area of sand repeatedly, they create a localized pit of quicksand, which will ensnare any creature that steps onto it and drag them below the sands, dropping them into the underground tunnels that the Balahara inhabit. Once dazed and hurt, the prey will not be able to fight back against the hungry leviathans. Should a victim still have the spunk to fight back, Balahara can slow it down by spewing an oily mucus at them, hindering their movement and exhausting them further. Getting caught by a Balahara is a gruesome fate, and one that looms over all during the fallow. In this season, Balahara become increasingly active, forming small groups and hunting somewhat regularly. Any creature traversing the southern desert of the plains must thus be careful and make for the grasslands or the fulgurite caves, both of which are luckily off limits for the leviathan, which needs fine sand to move through effectively. Most beneficiaries of the fallow are, however, not nearly as large as the Balahara. Some of them are small and inconspicuous, such as the palbug. This small critter is a decomposer, and will appear anywhere it perceives the sweet smell of juicy decay. Using the bristles on its forelegs, the palbugs sweep loose organic matter into their feeding organ, a process that can slowly but surely grind down even large corpses. These little fellows are most common during the Windward Plains fallow, but they can be found across the entire Eastlands, and are crucial to the circle of life in each of its ecosystems. But while palbugs are passive, quaint creatures, the other prime decomposer species of the plains is a different story altogether. As the season turns into the fallow, the hour of the Bluesky begins. These spindly neopterons are also decomposers, but their method is a tad more gruesome than that of the palbugs. The long, needle-like trunk of the Bluesky can be used to inject digestive acids directly into a corpse, dissolving it rapidly from within. The resulting corpse slime can then be sucked back up through that same trunk. What makes Bluesky quite problematic is that they are not opposed to providing the corpse themselves, and can sometimes be seen attacking keratonauts near their nests. Using the sensory hairs on their many legs, Bluesky can use sound to map out their environments. As they prefer to ambush prey by dropping onto it from ceilings and walls, they generally only roam around the fulgurite caves and cliffs. After having fed, their bodies become bloated and heavy, and they can often be found lazing around on these same walls while they digest. Many decomposers are, however, not such troublemakers. As a result of vegetation decay during the fallow, the area becomes a snug home for wiggle leeches, a type of maggot originally discovered in the New World. They are known to nest in rotting wood, and while they are present all around the Eastlands year-round, they grow especially fat during the fallow. They are known to have stamina-enhancing properties when digested, and are thus highly sought after by various creatures, including humans. While to some, the arrival of insectoid scavengers signals death and decay, to others they are signs of bounty. The explosion of species such as the Bluesky emboldens and attracts another species unique to the Windward Plains, whose heavy steps send a shiver down chitinous spines. As insects multiply, so too does the presence of the chotacabra increase. This green amphibian is infamous for its appetite and sports a fittingly massive maw, adorned with a large, spiky jaw. Called the Great Toad by the Kunafans, chotacabra become quite active during the fallow, as they prowl predominantly in the desert and cave zones of the region. They are primarily observed preying on Bluesky by swallowing them whole, or sitting around and lapping up the many flies buzzing around in the air. When not feasting on various critters, chotacabra patrol the fulgurite caves, enforcing their territory on any intruders they can handle. Curiously, while chotacabra are solitary in nature and territorial towards other monsters, they appear to be tolerant of other individuals of their species sharing their territory, a behavior the guild has, so far, been unable to understand. Should a chotacabra encounter an adversary during its patrols, it will display its main weapon. While most of the amphibian's body is covered in a supple, leathery hide, its arms are additionally armored with hard plate shelling, not unlike that found on wyverns. This alone allows the chotacabra to deliver devastating blows with its arms, but it can enhance this ability even further. By licking its arms with its enormous tongue, the amphibian adheres a sticky mucus onto its shell plating, which is shaped specifically to store it efficiently. By then rubbing its arms on the ground, the chotacabra attaches various materials, such as rock, fulgurite shards, sand, etc., to them, forming an additional layer of reinforcement. When fully armed, a chotacabra's punches are unbelievably destructive, and the enhanced armor can additionally repel counterattacks. The main downside of this maneuver is that the mucus gradually loses its adhesive quality and must be replenished quite frequently during extended combat. Still, as far as fighting strategies go, the chotacabra is not to be trifled with. That being said, it sticking to the caves and not venturing into the grasslands as often has been interpreted as a way to avoid excessive danger, as something much more threatening roams those areas in the fallow. One creature that conversely does not fear the grasslands and patrols them quite liberally during the fallow is the Chemetries. This brute wyvern is the largest scavenger species in the plains, and roams the area in search of carrion. Despite their size and imposing appearance, Chemetries do not actually hunt prey most of the time. Instead, they steal already hunted prey from other hunters, generally Talioth packs. To do this, Chemetries engage in fierce intimidation tactics. Their large tails can be used to strike a menacing figure by raising it up high as a warning. Its threatening coloration and shaggy scale hide turn every movement it makes into a jittering and aggressive statement of intent, and one that often works in securing meals from intimidated adversaries. In cases where a mere standoff is not enough, the Chemetries can employ its final threat. Between the many hanging filaments of its tail lie specialized glands that produce a thin, oil-like liquid. This substance, colloquially called Chemetries igniter, vaporizes near instantly when in contact with air, turning into a heavy gas that hangs low near the ground. Once this gas has been spread, the Chemetries can swing its tail around to rub the many hanging filaments on it together. These tissues are called pleats, and are covered in rough material that, through friction, creates sparks, much like flints. Using this mechanism, the Chemetries can ignite its flammable vapor by swinging its tail through it, creating a small wave of flame that will scare off even otherwise tough opponents. Ironically, Guild research has discovered that Chemetries igniter does not actually burn particularly hot. The flame is several times weaker than true wyvern fire, and does not cause extensive damage to organic tissue as a result. This has led to the belief that the Chemetries' flammability is, like its size and bulk, mostly a tool used for intimidation, a bluff meant to trick enemies into giving up prematurely. As far as tricks go, however, the Chemetries does not hold a candle to the true king of mischief. Most of the creatures encountered by the Forbidden Lands expedition team were either entirely new discoveries or monsters that had only sparse sightings back in the Western Territories. But the Windward Plains are also home to a monster every guild hunter is quite familiar with. Soon after they made first contact with the guild, the people of Kunafa began speaking of a monster that caused them regular trouble during the Fallow. Kunafa upholds a long tradition of using fulgurite for various decorative works, which is sustained by mining raw fulgurite during the fallow season. The shiny rocks they collect are said to attract the attention of a large wyvern, which blinds the miners and runs off with their goods. Based on this description, the guild was shortly after able to identify this troublemaker as a Gypceros, a bird wyvern that has been a topic of research since the earliest days of the Hunters Guild. Covered in a characteristic rubbery grey hide and sporting a very distinct beak, this bird wyvern is generally not considered a threat to humans. As an omnivore that does not actively hunt much, it rarely comes into direct conflict with human populations. However, it does have a deep appreciation for shiny objects, and will steal them whenever it can. The blinding described by the Kunafans was likely them experiencing one of the Gypceros' most infamous abilities. On its head, the wyvern grows an odd crest enriched with light crystals. By striking this crest with the upper wedge of its beak, the Gypceros can stimulate the light crystals into producing a powerful flash of light that blinds any that stand too close. It's a powerful maneuver that allows the Gypceros to escape dire situations, or steal trinkets from humans with ease. Here in the Windward Plains, Gypceros only appear during the fallow season. One possible reason that has been proposed for this is that this period has a distinct lack of large predators. While there is one exception, most large monsters present during this time are either insectivores, scavengers, or small to mid-sized carnivores. Thus, as far as large threats go, the Gypceros does not have to fear many during the fallow. Moreover, it likely benefits from being an omnivore, as it can feed on nearly anything. Extremely useful during a season when everyone else is fighting over resources. The rubbery skin of the wyvern also makes it quite resistant to diseases and poisons associated with decay, further enabling it to thrive during the putrid fallow. When active in the region, Gypceros nest in the upper corners of the Fulgurite cliffs, where they generally spend the nights. They adorn their resting grounds with collected minerals, which they seem transfixed by whenever they are not sleeping. They also mark the perimeter of the nests with mucus. Samples collected from these markings have confirmed that the Gypceros of the Eastlands also produce dash extract in their bodies, same as their relatives found in the West. This substance is a natural performance enhancer that is produced in the bodies of various monsters, granting them superior stamina and endurance. When diluted, it is also quite effective in humans, which is why Gypceros research has been so important to the guild. In the mornings, Gypceros head down into the grasslands to drink and feed. They spend much of their days roaming the area, patrolling around the grasslands and fulgurite caves, looking for food. This is also when a Gypceros might encounter trouble, such as running into an angry Chotacabra. In such situations, the various combat skills of the species come into play. Its bulky body is heavy enough to trample and crash into smaller enemies, and its elastic tail has a deceptively long range to its swipes. But raw physicality is not what makes the Gypceros dangerous. This bird wyvern possesses a poison sac, an organ that produces toxic mucus that can be spat at enemies. Gypceros poison is actually quite weak compared to many toxins used by other wyverns. To compensate, a Gypcerian poison sac is extremely active, generating large quantities of poison near constantly. This allows the Gypceros to spit out poison globs quite liberally, dousing its enemies in overwhelming amounts of sticky purple slime with little hesitation. Weak or not, if administered at a high enough quantity, even this poison will wear down most victims. Additionally, Gypceros mucus is thick and adhesive, leading it to stick to walls and ceilings, from where it slowly trickles down over time, extending the danger of exposure even after the initial attack. What truly sets Gypceros apart, though, is their intelligence. While some guild hunters may disregard them due to their appearance, they are highly cunning and strategic wyverns, able to calculate risks and devise plans of attack or escape. Most famously, Gypceros are known to play dead to trick enemies into letting their guard down for a moment, before either blinding or poisoning them. As far as tricks go, few monsters live up to the standards set by the Gypceros. However, no amount of trickery can compare to the sheer might of the true ruler of the Fallow. While they are usually native to the Scarlet Forest in the north, Doshaguma are known to appear in the plains at times. These terrifying fanged beasts are true barbarians, mountains of concentrated muscle ready to lash out at anything that even vaguely resembles a meal. Few creatures can match a hungry Doshaguma in sheer power, as these monsters resemble hurricanes of shaggy hair and death. As if their size and muscle mass was not already a deadly combination, their sharp claws and long tusk-like teeth ensure that no prey survives their encounter with this fiend. But while Doshaguma are an imposing sight all year round, they are especially feared in the Windward Plains during the fallow, for one simple reason. Perhaps agitated by the harsh conditions and cognizant of the scarcity of food, Doshaguma forgo their usually solitary nature during the fallow and instead begin forming packs of 3 to 5 individuals. These packs are led by an especially vicious Doshaguma, which undergoes a hormonal transformation that colors its mane red and increases its size dramatically. Under the guidance of such an alpha Doshaguma, these packs are an unstoppable force that rips through the ecosystem like a storm. No creature, herbivore or carnivore, can afford running into a Doshaguma pack during the fallow. An entire pack of Talioth might be able to topple an alpha Doshaguma if it's caught off guard and alone, but against the entire group, nothing stands a real chance. The only saving grace is that Doshaguma packs are temporary and inherently fickle. Each individual is by itself strong enough to survive, a confidence that gives rise to many internal conflicts. Consequently, Doshaguma packs are also not particularly cooperative. The alpha tends to hoard the most desirable areas of the region, while the betas fan out and inspect the other zones for suitable prey, attracting their pack mates through guttural roars if they find something. In the wake of such destructive forces, many inhabitants of the plains enter a sort of lethargy, where they avoid venturing out of their burrows and nests even if it means going hungry for a time. An extreme example of this is the rough lizard, a reptile native to these plains. They grow distinct bulbs of adipose tissue on their necks and tails, which serve as external fat storage. As these lizards are quite voracious, the state of their storage tissue can be used to determine the overall degree of abundance within the ecosystem. During the fallow, rough lizards enter a truly pitiful state. All color fades from their storage tissue, and they appear shriveled and emaciated. Small as they are, they cannot risk looking for food when the fallow turns their home into a wasteland where they themselves are easily spotted and devoured by all the other hungry inhabitants. Instead, rough lizards rely on the fat they stored in previous seasons, slowly burning through it while moving as little as possible, patiently waiting for the seasons to change. And they do not wait in vain. If there is one constant in the Eastlands, it is that the conditions never stay the same. The fallow is but one season that affects the region for a time, and once its reign ends, it too must vanish. But not without fanfare. The end of the fallow is heralded by a true display of nature's ferocity. All across the Forbidden Lands, the fallow concludes with events called inclemencies. These violent weather events transform the landscape rapidly, putting a sudden and extreme pressure on the ecosystem and all of its participants. And in the Windward Plains, this event begins with the arrival of a roiling sandstorm that sweeps across the area and entirely blots out the sun. As blades of sand dance across the dunes, the sky beyond the storm veil is anything but placid. It also comes alive, roaring and crackling with electricity and levin. Before long, lightning pelts the desert and thunder screams across the horizon. A sandstorm enveloped in thunderclouds. This is the inclemency of the Windward Plains, known as the Sandtide. Within what seems like the blink of an eye, the Windward Plains become a dark wasteland, so thoroughly saturated with lightning strikes that all who stay in the open risk getting cooked by one. The only reprieve is offered by the shelters under the fulgurite structures, and the various thin obelisks in the area, which function as lightning rods that divert and catch the bolts before they harm anything else near them. Curiously, the writing inscribed on these obelisks appears to glow during the Sandtide, a characteristic they share with the wind's gasp, which is cloaked in an eerie blue aura during this event. The Eastlands are full of ancient ruins and remnants of antique mechanisms beyond the understanding of our current science. Some researchers have thus suggested that these observations might indicate that these inclemencies might either be empowered or even caused by ancient technologies lost to the Veil of Time. The Hunters Guild and the Royal Academy have thus far refused to confirm these findings publicly, however. Either way, the Sandtide has a profound impact on the inhabitants of the Windward Plains. Many, such as the Chotacabra and the Chemetris, simply flee, making for sheltered areas and avoiding spending any time out in the open. Similarly, Bonos find holes and nooks in the fulgurite caves to wait out the storm. Flying up high while the levin dances is ill-advised, after all. Meanwhile, a species of insect called thunderbug takes the opportunity to gather in large colonies. These critters are known for their ability to generate weak electric currents, and are generally attracted to other kindred sources of electricity. During the Sandtide, when the air crackles with thunder, they become so agitated and excited that they bunch together into swarms, colloquially called great thunderbugs. In groups like these, the bugs release enough electricity to stun even large monsters. However, perhaps the most peculiar strategy to survive the Sandtide is employed by the Keratonoth. As the males sense the approaching thunderclouds, they call out for their herd to get in formation. Rapidly, the females huddle around the nearest male and lay down, pressing their bodies as flat to the ground as they can. At the same time, the males stand centrally in the herd, arching their backs and raising their spikes as high as possible. Lightning tends to strike higher points more frequently than lower points, and so, the spikes of the male Keratonoth serve as lightning rods that protect the herd. The spikes themselves are made of hard keratinous tissue that does neither conduct electricity nor take any real damage from the lightning. Using this strategy, the Keratonoth simply lie in wait, hoping for the storm to pass. Not everyone flees or hides at the rumble of the Sandtide, however. For some, this nightmarescape is a vital moment. The Balahara take this opportunity to gather in large groups that violently rip through the dunes of the Windward Plains. The purpose of this behavior was long debated, but a possible answer was suggested recently. The carapace of a Balahara is partially made up by fulgurite, which adheres to the skin as the Leviathan drills through the earth. Over time, the fulgurite segments of the shell break down and fall apart, either by simple friction or through confrontation with adversarial monsters. The Sandtide is thus necessary in replenishing the Balahara's armor, as the sands are saturated with small bits of fulgurite that are flung off and scattered from various lightning strikes. If the ensuing digging and burrowing allows them to secure some meals from herbivores attempting to escape the thunder, then that's all the better. They must, however, be careful. Their fulgurite shells are extremely conductive and stick directly to their fleshy skin, making the Balahara quite vulnerable to lightning strikes. So, to rearm themselves, these leviathans must risk getting charred by thunderbolts. The Balahara are not the only ones that benefit from the thunder strikes. There are some organisms that can actually digest fulgurite, making the Sandtide a welcome buffet. One endemic species that does this is the landlight shrimp, a blue-colored crustacean that can be found hanging on walls all around the Windward Plains. Using their long, specialized appendages, they scrape off small bits of fulgurite that adhere to the ambient rocks and feast on it. How exactly they are able to extract nutrition from the mineral is not entirely clear. One way or another, landlight shrimp benefit from the Sandtide greatly, eating away happily while enjoying a violent light show. But ultimately, the Sandtide is the domain of one species, and one species only. While others might survive and cope, only a single monster truly thrives under these conditions. It is the undisputed apex predator of the Windward Plains, the Sultan of the storm-swept sands. Every evolutionary adaptation, every behavioral habit, every survival strategy that has emerged in this region has done so for one reason: to help either avoid or survive a potential confrontation with Rei Dao. Called Destruction's Knell by the people of Kunafa, this flying wyvern is the undisputed ruler of the Windward Plains. Sporting an entirely unique set of 4 flexible horns, it only emerges during the Sandtide, and the characteristic sound of its shell moving through the air does as much to scare away other creatures as the roaring thunder. It is, in fact, this sound that the gem chimes of Kunafa imitate in order to repel other monsters. In other words, the mere sound of a Rei Dao afflicts lesser monsters with fear of such magnitude that Kunafa was able to build an entire existence based on its efficacy. Such a reputation can only be earned by unmatched ferocity, and the Rei Dao certainly lives up to that. Like most true flying wyverns, it is agile yet strong, nimble in the air and forceful in its strikes. Somewhat unusually, the Rei Dao grows hardened edges on its wing arms that it can use to swipe at and punch prey to death. Its powerful tail can crush smaller enemies instantly, and sharp talons allow for a strong and deadly grip. But none of these features are what crown Rei Dao as the unmatched Lord of the Storm. Instead, it is its unique mechanism of attack, an ability that only few creatures can hope to withstand. The golden shell of a ray Dao is highly conductive and maintains a weak current at all times. As the wyvern moves around the Windward Plains, small bits of sand come into contact with the shell and are converted into pure fulgurite, gradually building up a layer of blue minerals on select parts of the body where the charge is most concentrated. Simultaneously, the ray Dao uses various strategies, such as flying up into the storm clouds or sitting upright in an open field, to attract lightning strikes to itself. When struck, the lightning does not hurt the creature at all, and is instead diverted by the shell into its wings, tail, and horns. As the wyvern accumulates higher electric charges, more fulgurite forms on its body, which in turn allows it to store even more electricity. This can go as far as creating massive blue armor shells on the wing arms and tail, which crackle with stored thunder. It is in fact the rubbing of fulgurite crystals that produces that characteristic chime sound. Once charged up enough, ray Dao can freely utilize the thunder as a weapon, imbuing its strikes with it for additional power. But the real threat of this wyvern lies in its head. If the body of a ray Dao is a massive power storage mechanism, then the horns are the release valve. The flexible joints at the base of the horns allows them to be arranged into a frontal position, obscuring the face and creating a singular point for the electricity to flow towards. By aiming this charge and then releasing it, the ray Dao can imitate the skies it calls home and launch a lightning strike at whatever it chooses to. These bolts can range from small shocks that incapacitate prey to massive destructive levins that nearly disintegrate whatever they hit. When at maximum charge, the force of this attack becomes so great that the wyvern extends fleshy capacitor organs from the side of its neck to better handle the thunder and avoid damaging its own tissue. It is this ability that grants it the throne of an apex. No creature in the Windward Plains can afford getting hit by a ray Dao's bolt. As a result, all creatures avoid it as much as possible. For its part, the ray Dao does as it pleases. It is extremely territorial and will attack anything it perceives as an intruder immediately and with no mercy. Outside of such disputes, the wyvern mostly waltzes around the grasslands, absorbing thunder strikes passively and occasionally feeding on whatever herbivore it spots at any given time. It can also sometimes be seen grooming the fulgurite growths on its wings. As its charge increases, fulgurite forms continuously, which can eventually become a problem if the growths become so big and heavy that they impede its flight. Thus, the crystals must be partially shed regularly. The guild has been able to confirm that during the Sandtide, ray Dao nests inside the wind's gasp, where the rocky floors are nearly entirely covered in fulgurite. Spending time on this highly electrified surface likely improves the base charge capacity of the ray Dao and catalyzes its ability to store thunder. It is currently unknown where ray Dao spend their time during the other seasons, or how large their populations might be. Given that only one individual is spotted in the Windward Plains during each Sandtide, and considering their extreme territorial aggression, they are believed to be fairly rare overall. The Sandtide is a violent, terrifying event, a sight of nature roiling in anger at its own wards, ruled over by a storm-born monarch. But, like all hardship, it too passes. The winds subside, the clouds part, and the region's apex flies off. And in the wake of it all, new life springs forth. The sun emerges victoriously, and in its rays, the Windward plains come alive, as entire swaths of grass and bushland blossom at once. This is the season known as the Plenty, when life thrives in abundance, and the land is revitalized. The resurgence of vegetation leads to an increase in herbivore populations and regular insect species, while scavengers and decomposer insects diminish by comparison. While the rising ambient temperature does still pose a threat to the unprepared, the Windward Plains in the Plenty is a sight of true beauty. One must only look at the rough lizard to understand the change that occurs. Its body revitalized, the storage tissue enlarges and takes on a bright pink color, giving the reptile a vibrant and bulbous collar. As one observes these lizards bathing in the sun and bobbing their heavy heads happily, one comes to grasp the relief that the Plenty brings. In this season of abundance, the herbivores that spent the previous seasons cowering in fear rise up and take hold of the ecosystem. Keratonoth gather in massive herds in the northern grasslands, where they graze and relax out in the open. While they must still stay vigilant of potential predators, one in particular, the size of the herd and presence of additional males makes approaching the Keratonoth a more difficult endeavor. As a result, this herbivore species thrives in the Plenty. It is also during this season that one may spot a few juvenile Keratonoth. These younglings are quite a rare sight and only appear during the Plenty, which has led to the people of Kunafa considering them a good omen, heralding a bountiful season. But the real star of the Plenty is another species of herbivore altogether. Once the season of Plenty rolls around, enormous herds of Dalthodon begin to gather near the grasslands. These bipedal herbivores are migratory and follow the Plenty across the Eastlands. When the Windward Plains are in fallow, only a sparse few Dalthodon remain for unclear reasons, while the main herd moves to the Scarlet Forest, where the Plenty aligns with the plains' fallow season. Once the forest falls into fallow and the Plenty moves into the plains, the Dalthodon follow, arriving from the north in large numbers. The grasslands are thus transformed into a herbivore sanctuary, where enormous groups of Keratonoth and Dalthodon claim the banks of the river alongside each other. Like their quadruped herbivore neighbors, the Dalthodon also raise their young in this season. Juvenile Dalthodon are neutrally colored and quite dull in appearance, which is believed to be an adaptation to avoid attracting attention. A key difference between Keratonoth and Dalthodon ecologically is that while the former can only really defend itself with its armor and bulk, the latter has an actual weapon at its disposal. Dalthodon grow extremely hard head plates and can use them as battering rams. While they are generally calm creatures, they will defend their herd if threatened. This offensive ability is enough to scare off some smaller predators, making the plenty a season of rest and recovery for herbivore populations. Dalthidon are also unique in that they have been partially domesticated. Kunafa village maintains a small population of docile Dalthidon, which are raised and kept for their milk, a key ingredient in the many delicious cheese dishes of this culture. Life returns to the Windward Plains in many such ways. The revitalization of flora is especially impactful, awakening an entire encyclopedia's worth of critters and insects that rely on ample plant life to survive. But few species of plants have such a profound effect on their surroundings as the Vita lily. These tall flowers produce a special nectar with strong restorative properties, and are quite popular feeding spots for many insects as a result. Chief among them is a species originally discovered in the New World, called the vigor wasp. Using its dexterous limbs, this large insect collects restorative nectar from Vita lilies and stores it in a massive bubble held beneath its abdomen. How exactly it creates the necessary surface tension is not understood yet, but it appears that the wasp uses the storage to gradually sip on nectar over a period of time. Both vigor wasps and Vita lilies are present all year round, but the blooming of the lilies in the plenty allows the wasp population to increase suddenly. Additionally, special individuals called giant vigor wasps have only been noted during the plenty season. The relationship between these giants and their regular versions is not yet clear. They are larger, paler in color, and seem to be able to hold much larger bubbles of nectar than their smaller relatives. Whether giant vigor wasps are a subspecies, a variation, or even a temporary change due to hormonal or social factors is currently unknown. While sightings of vigor wasps are a classic sign of the plenty, there is a species of endemic life that represents the changing of the season even more so. The beginning of the plenty is often accompanied by a soft song reverberating through the trees of the grasslands. This is the melody of the Amstridian, a flying creature that only appears in the Windward Plains during the plenty. The rest of the year, these green singers live further north, in the Scarlet Forest, but when the season turns, they appear in the plains to nest and raise their young. Building homes in the trees of the grasslands, Amstridians form lifelong pairs that help each other in all aspects of parenting, feeding the young, and gathering materials to reinforce the nest. It has been suggested that the reason they migrate to the plains for this is the presence of certain high-protein insects that appear in large quantities here during this season. These critters are excellent food sources for growing Amstridians, and thus the plains become a perfect place for parents to raise the next generation. Life also thrives in the bushes beneath the savanna trees. Here, various tiny creatures live out their days, flitting between the grass and securing food in the form of seeds and insects. One prolific participant here is the wind rustler, a reptilian biped that can often be seen rushing across the grasslands in packs. These highly social fellows hang around in groups and use their tridented head crests to communicate with each other silently. The guild has already invested some time into understanding this unique form of language, and has so far discovered that when the crest is situated upright, it indicates danger and tells the pack to run away. Wind rustlers are believed to be highly intelligent, and have been spotted hanging around Kunafa village, suggesting that they have begun getting used to and perhaps even seeking out human presence. But it is still too early to draw any real conclusions. Another object of study is the mysterious black wind rustler, a larger, dark-skinned variation that can occasionally be seen among a pack. The exact relation between light and dark wind rustlers is a hot topic among guild researchers today. Life also returns to the southern desert of the Windward Plains. While it may be harder to spot than the teeming rustlings of the grasslands, it is no less fascinating. One might, for example, spot a group of reptiles with large, oddly shaped tails out on the dunes. These track-tail lizards are adapted to life in a world where the sun blazes onto a mostly featureless expanse. The large tail tip serves two functions. It can be folded over the body to provide shade from the sun, or, more astoundingly, the lizard can prop itself up with its tail, using the tip as a rudimentary foot. In this upright position, a track-tail lizard is capable of surveying the desert around it quite effectively. No trees or mountains obscure its vision, just a blanket of dunes under the watchful eye of the track-tail. The name comes from the mark left behind from their standing behavior. When pressed flat, the tail tip produces an imprint not unlike those left by wyvern feet. Thus, the tail leaves fake tracks. Track-tail lizards travel in small groups, with one member taking lookout duty while the others eat, drink, or sleep. But abundance like this naturally also affects carnivorous monsters as well. The mighty Doshaguma, which ruled over these plains in the Fallow, still roams its grasslands occasionally during the plenty. However, in this season, they do not appear to form packs as often, and are in general seen on much rarer occasions. It is believed that they largely retreat back into their native forest, potentially to avoid encounters with a new threat that only appears in the plains during the plentiful season. This new threat is in fact an old nemesis of the Hunters Guild. For as long as monster hunters have existed, they have faced the dangers of dealing with Rathian. These flying wyverns are the females of the Wrath species, and are feared far and wide for their aggressive temper and numerous deadly weapons. During the plenty season, Rathians begin appearing in the Windward Plains, and their presence shifts the ecosystem's dynamic accordingly. Rathians are powerful predators both on land and in the air, with strong hind legs for running and flexible wings for flying. They can often be spotted snacking on Keratonoth and surveying the area in the grasslands, where they remain mostly undisturbed. Should a rival predator approach it, the Rathian will reveal why it is colloquially called the Queen of the Lands. Besides her raw physicality, the Rathian's body is also covered in numerous dark green spines, which form an especially concentrated cluster at the tip of its tail. These spines are linked directly to the Rathian's venom gland, and ooze with wrath poison, a deadly toxin that few creatures can withstand. These barbs thus function as both offense and defense. The cluster on the tail is used as a weapon, as the limb is swung around violently like a poisoned sledgehammer. Meanwhile, the bundled barbs surrounding the shoulders and wings are arranged such that attempting to land a fatal strike on the Rathian automatically puts an attacker at risk of being stung, deterring such attempts. It also protects the Rathian from being attacked from above. Shrouded in these deadly barbs, a Rathian is near untouchable, leaving any unfortunate adversary unable to effectively defend itself against the wyvern. For its part, the Rathian uses its tail, talons, and weight to establish its superiority. Its tough layered armor shell also makes any strikes that do land on its body generally ineffective. Should an enemy evoke its true ire, the Rathian will unleash its most powerful weapon. The Wrath species have a peculiar anatomical quirk wherein various substances within their bodies, such as their bone marrow and body fluids, are highly flammable when exposed to air. From these substances, Wraths derive a flammable powder that is stored and concentrated inside of their flame sacs, organs specialized in containing flammable materials. When necessary, the flame sac can funnel these materials into the maws of the Wraths, creating a glowing flame that appears to dance in their throats. Once activated, the flame sac can then be stimulated into mixing the fluids and powders within itself into powerful flame blasts released through the mouth. The Rathian is especially adept at this, and can spew massive fireballs in quick succession. These flames are in a completely different league from the measly sparks created by Ecology. This is true Wyvern's fire. One feature of this notorious type of flame is that it can be empowered by first condensing it through pressure, a quality the Rathian makes use of to turn the orange fire in its mouth into a raging white-hot nova that incinerates even the toughest enemies with ease. Abilities like these make the Rathian a terrifying presence in the plains, but luckily, various factors limit her influence. For one, Rathians only ever appear by themselves here, and have never been seen accompanied by their male counterpart Rathalos in the Windward Plains. The bonds and dynamics between male and female Wraths are an extremely complex topic, and have been known to vary between regional populations. In the regions near the Hunters Guild's headquarters, Wraths generally pair up for life and are monogamous. Meanwhile, in the distant New World continent, one male Rathalos maintains a harem of female Rathians, who create a hierarchy between each other, with the higher-ranked females living with their king in the forest, while lower-ranked Rathians are pushed out into surrounding deserts. Considering that the Windward Plains borders on the Scarlet Forest, it has been proposed that perhaps Eastland Wraths nurture a similar dynamic as the New World variations. The Rathians that appear in the plains might thus be lower-ranked females, while the more dominant Rathians remain with their Rathalos in the Scarlet Forest year-round. More research is however necessary before anything can be conclusively determined. Beyond her solitude, the Rathian also only has a limited window of activity in the Windward Plains. It displays crepuscular patterns, being most active during sunrise and sunset, and sometimes sticking around into the night. It however tends to retreat during the daytime. Due to this, the Rathian's presence is not as oppressive as it could be, giving all other inhabitants regular respite from the Queen's terror. This limited activity has been suggested to be another adaptation to minimize the chance of encountering Raydao. Like with all members of the Wrath genus, the Rathian's shell may be resistant to physical force and heat, but it is also highly vulnerable to thunder-based attacks. Thus, a confrontation with a Raydao would surely be fatal. And so, the Rathian strategically chooses to terrorize the plains at dusk and dawn, disappearing during the day. The presence of such fierce royalty, sporadic as it may be, naturally changes the dynamics of the Windward Plains. Talioth, which previously reigned as the Fallow's top mid-sized predator, is now relegated to a bit player, resting at the margins of the grasslands and desert zones, hoping to snatch a careless herbivore away from its herd. Fierce as they may be as packs, against a well-organized, numerous herd or an irritated Rathian, there simply is not much that they can do. And so, the Talioth gradually retreat from the region, ready to reappear in full force during the next Fallow. Like all environments in the Eastlands, the Windward Plains are a place where beauty and cruelty, life and death, birth and decay coexist in a stark dance. A shifting place marked by flux. And upon the dunes, one creature perhaps best exemplifies the world we found so far east. At night, travelers might come upon a sand star. This small, rodent-like creature is named for its brilliant blue glow, which illuminates the dune desert as it darts across the soil. Very little is known about its ecology. It has sensitive hearing and will be stunned by loud sounds. It runs fast, and the ground it treads is left with a short-lived, ephemeral glow. But maybe more important than its ecology is the mere fact of its existence. In a place ravaged by seasons of decay, pelted by roaring levin bolts, graced by periods of calm only to transition back into adversity. In those lands, flits about a mouse that shines like a star. Hardships come and go. The sky dances in every color conceivable. And the only constant is that where life resides, beauty emerges inevitably. Thank you, everyone, so much for watching. As usual, a very special thank you to all of our patrons and YouTube channel members. I would like to take the opportunity to especially thank Yuriv, Michael Monroe, Johnny, CJ, Carl the Crab, Christopher Bronson, Harpir, and Suddenly, Suck Ubu Bus 69, Molly Mockery, Rose, Zyperius Folkvar, Hamburger Discord, Zaffi, Theopuz, Lufish, Morgul Blank, Tacti Wolf, Phyla Zero, Jacob Coleman, Hellbug Hunter, Shebo, M1 Have 12, Regal Eagle, Ronger 97, Quali, Matt Hat 124, My Name Gone, The Dollarfish, Shiba, Ryan Hook, Veraxis, Thick, Kuroneko, Zion H.V. Augenson, Alistair in Wonderland, Jacob the Numnut, Soruka, Sir Newt, Evie, Rambling Robin, Hashi, Black Ace 202, Dissy, Habo Himbro Mirror, Magenta, Russell, Vulgar Beast, Person 212, Claire Miboon, Oakwood Tree, Mr. Pyramid, Makot 02, Geo, Nils Schlatter, Iron Camel, and Nah, I'm going to bed. Take care, everyone. I hope you keep enjoying Monster Hunter Wilds, and I hope you keep enjoying all the videos I'll be making about Monster Hunter Wilds. Alright, take care. Bye-bye. Happy hunting.